Hi everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to my weekly wrap up for week 49 of 2021. We are getting there, everybody. We are getting there. Please don't mind my eyebrows, which got a bit over colored today. My eyebrows aren't something that I always do, but I've been trying to more lately, and the color was just not blend. But anyway, we're not talking about that. First, we have two new channel members to welcome to the channel. It's been a little while, so thank you so much for joining. We have Margaret Bloodworth, who joined at the Sassy Supporter level. So thank you, Margaret. We're so happy to have you here. And then Warda joined at the Romantic Renegade level. So Warda, so happy to have you. It just always means so much to me when people are willing to support my channel, especially going into my fourth year, which is crazy. So sorry, let me get back to, we have the last few reads that I read in November, and then the other books I read since the start of December. I already have my November wrap up, and actually a couple of these books are in that one. So you can definitely find those there, but let's go ahead and dive in because I have a couple of books to rant about. But one book that I need to mention that I forgot to put in the last two wrap-ups, because I got to read a beta copy of this book and then I couldn't talk about it. So, there was a couple weeks ago where I was like, there's a book I can't talk about. Someone was so sweet. They thought that I got to read an early copy of, like, what was it? Damn, it was a book that doesn't come out for a long time, and I was like, I'm not that cool. I wish I was. But I did get to read an early copy of There Is No Devil. I already talked about this one in my monthly wrap up, but this was the conclusion to the Sinner's Duet. Wow, I totally blanked. Sophie and Mr. Luck were kind enough to send me a copy of this. She also was sweet enough, like I said, to let me read a beta copy, which I couldn't tell anyone about because the ARC people hadn't even got it yet. And I read it all in one sitting, and I absolutely loved it. And there's not too much that I can say about it, because if you haven't read There Are No Saints, I can't tell you too much. But this is about dueling serial killers and the woman, Mara, who gets put in between them. But Mara refuses to be anyone's pawn, and that leads us into kind of a protege slash master situation with Cole and Mara, and their relationship has so many layers. There's so many emotional and deep things that get dug into in this, and Sophie has called this an inspirational story of murder, and it's hard to explain why, because this is a duet that, even for me, it reaches into something that is very uncomfortable to dive into, and it's fascinating, as well as being pretty kinky and fun. If you like shaving scenes, you will find some things to like in here. This duet is now complete. Your reasons to wait on it are over. These are in KU. They're freaking brilliant. I mean, you're probably going to want a paperback of these though, because they're gorgeous. So this was one, again, I read this 2 weeks ago, but I wanted to officially have it in a weekly wrap up in case you don't watch my monthly wrap ups or whatever. And also it's another reason to talk about Sophie Lark, which I will do always because I love her so much. We are a stan for Sophie on this channel. It's gonna be great. And she was kind enough to say that she will be back on my channel again soon. So definitely be subscribed. I have some plans for some author hangouts in 2022, and I hope they will come to fruition, but I'm going to do my best to make them happen. Also, I'm deciding now. The clouds, they're fucking with me today. I like this naturalish glow mixed with my ring light, and so if it comes through and it's streaking on my face, we're just going to fucking leave it. I'm telling that to myself, not you. But okay, let's get into this. So the first book that I finished this week was The Fixer by Ellie Isaacson. This book is already out. This is another entry into the Underworld Kings. This one was not my favorite. I don't even want to talk about it that much because it's the same setup as so many of the others. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was okay. I have found some really great ones in this series, and I have one to talk about in a minute here, but this one was not one of them. I was kind of bored. This was my first Ellie Isaacson, and it was okay. If you're going to read all of the books in this connected series, you're going to read it, and if not, you're not, and it's okay. It'll be okay. Then I read Wrong by Adelaide Forrest, which actually just came out on the 3rd, and this, I guess, is part of another, like, series that is connected by authors, which I hadn't heard about this. I heard about this because I was checking Candy Cane PR for different books to sign up for, which that's definitely something you can do if you are starting out as an influencer. Like if you're wanting to review and be an influencer, you should check out some different independent PR groups like Valentine PR, Candy Cane PR, Give Me Books PR, because it's a great way to start reviewing books. But anyway, and I saw that Adelaide Forrest had a book on this list, and I was like, what? Because she also has a book coming out the end of December in one of my favorite mafia series. She writes dark mafia. And this one said that it was a dad's best friend, severe like age gap romance with lots of kinky stuff going on. And I was like, great. And it was only 150 pages because these are all like novella length about. And this one was exactly what it said. I actually put this in my favorites of the month list just because I hadn't read a book quite this like dubious consent, and definitely not like their initial sex scene together is a rape scene, but it's also under the guise of it's a mistaken situation kind of thing. Yeah, so this is a dad's best friend, basically like her uncle. Like she's treated him like her uncle, but she started to have sexy thoughts about him lately. And he's started to notice her since she turned 18. She is only 18, so it is taboo. He's like 43, I think. But yeah, he's been around her whole life. And he likes dubious consent situations. Or consensual non-consent, not dubious consent, consensual non-consent. And so he signs up with this club where they will like set up the connection for you so that it can be even more like, you know, dubious about it. And so they both sign their consent ahead of time, and they have a safe word set up and a situation set up and everything. And when he goes to kidnap this girl who has signed up for it, her description is that of basically his niece Everly, who, again, not his niece, but his best friend's daughter. And so he thinks that she really is as kinky as he is, and so he kidnaps her, not the girl who actually signed up for it. So because this was always supposed to be a kidnapping scenario anyway, he takes her back to the club, blindfolds her, and then he rapes her, all the while she's saying no, but he thinks that's part of it. And she never says like the predetermined like safe word or anything because she doesn't know it. And then when it's over, he gets a text from the girl he was supposed to kidnap, and he realizes that he raped her. But now the seal has been cracked, and he's like, well, I took your virginity. You were always meant to be mine anyways. I'm taking you. And she's just like, what? So anyway, it's a novella. It is very kinky. It's very dirty. It is uncomfortable. It has also a forced pregnancy element to it, which Adelaide Forrest does quite often, actually. But it's a good time if you like that stuff, and you know I do. No kink shaming here. And then the last book that I finished in November was my reread of Rebel Bitten by Lexi Foss. I'm not a huge fan of this size of these because they just split so bad. But anyway, this was one of my favorite books of 2021, and I'm rereading it. This is in a vlog that's coming out this week because I am vlogging all of my rereads that I'm doing, which is really cool. So this is part of the Blood Alliance series. I mean, this one's number 4, so I don't really want to spoil anything. But there are vampires and lycans, and humans don't have any rights in this world. They're basically the playthings for their immortal betters. And we have this heroine named Willow who's actually escaped from a lycan breeding camp where they basically were fucking her to death. That's what was happening. And she was going to bear their babies because lycans can't breed within themselves. They can either make more lycans or they have to breed with a human to get more. So they do that. And she ends up escaping onto the lands of a rider who's one of the oldest vampires, but he also has stayed out of their politics because he just sees them as a bunch of annoying children who are slowly ruining the planet, but he's just been keeping his step out of it. And then Willow stumbles across his land, and he's like, Willow's going to be mine. I'm going to take her. And then he gets pulled into some things that he maybe doesn't want to be pulled into, but obviously this is still a 6-star book. And yeah, definitely check out my reading vlogs to find out where this book is ranking with all the rest of them. Okay, and then the books I've read in December so far. Okay, so I read The Wrong Heart by Jennifer Hartmann. This is a book that not only have I been interested in, but this was on in my viewer recommendation form because I read Still Beating earlier this year and I was really moved by this book. This book is about a woman that in the beginning of this book we see her husband get killed right in front of her. She gets mugged and he tries to chase after the man and he gets hit by a car. And her husband is an organ donor and he donates his heart. And a little while after losing her husband, she wants to get in contact with the person who has his heart. And she really kind of is badgering the surgeon, which, I mean, the surgeon cannot tell her who the person is that got this heart. But she ends up giving her his email address. And so she emails this person and they don't get back to her for like 6 months. Now in the interim of that time, she's actually tried to kill herself. And so after, you know, that whole ordeal, she needs to go to this like weekly support group for like dealing with grief and for people who have like suicidal thoughts and everything. And she meets a man named Parker there who has also attempted suicide before. And he has a lot of issues. And he hates women. And he was very hard to swallow for a long time. Like if you saw my Goodreads updates while I was doing this, up until like 60%, I was like, why am I wasting time with this person? But I knew from what some other people's reviews that they had felt the same way as me. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to trust Jennifer Hartmann. I'm going to keep going. And when I found out his reasons for, number one, why he hates women, number two, why he pushes our heroine away so much, and just why he's so fucked up, number one, I completely like, quote unquote, bought it. Like I bought why he had so much animosity in him. And number two, I just loved him so dearly. And this book was wonderful. Also to do with the email address, you might have guessed by the setup that they are actually emailing each other too. And this isn't a secret. It's very clear to us from like chapter 3 when Parker finally decides to answer this email and they don't know that this person from support group is also the person that they're emailing. So it's one of those. And I was also nervous how that element would come out. But it's very interesting because that secret, which you'd think would be like, oh, the author's going to use this as the third act conflict. There is something even more that I was not expecting that also has to do with the title. And this was a 5-star book. So then I got to read City of Thieves by Cora, Kenborn, and Catherine Wiltcher. This book is also already out. This is another book in the Underworld Kings. This one I loved. I give this one 4.5 stars. Actually. Like, love this so much. So this one, our heroine is works in the art world. She actually has a gallery that's actually in trouble right now. But she procures art for this one mafia guy who kind of has something over her head, which we don't know what it is. And then we have our hero who wants to get revenge for the death of his brother, and he's told by an associate that this woman who runs this gallery is going to be the inn that he needs to get revenge. And he doesn't know why, he just knows that he needs to get his hands on her. And it turns out it's because there's a painting that's about to come up for auction at the fancy auction house in London. It like has a name and everything. It's very well known. And he needs her help to get it, apparently. And yeah, that's kind of all I want to say. This one does have trigger warnings for assault and like domestic abuse in the past and kind of present too. So, I mean, it's mafia, so take that for what you will, but this one is definitely in my top 3 that I've read in this series, and I think I've read like 8 of these so far, which isn't even all of them. There's more to come, and ones that I didn't have arcs for. Then I read The Warlord by Gena Showalter. This was my first Gena Showalter. I've never read one of hers before, and I've always been intimidated. I do own a couple of her other books because they've been recommended to me by you, some of her other like paranormal. This book was so interesting. So like, I'm just going to read you the back of it because the setup for this was very confusing. So this is the start of its own series, but it does spin off from another series too. But when I saw that this was the start of a new series, I thought it would be a good time to jump into it. And I loved the tagline. The tagline said, 30 days to wed a virgin, 30 days to sacrifice her, 30 nights to resist temptation. So like, that was the setup. And I was like, I'm in. This is the beginning of the series. I want to try it. I was able to get the book on Libby. There was no wait for it. So I did it. I literally bought it and like started it that day, which I don't usually get to do. I usually buy books and then they sit around for 6 to 8 months that I can get to them. But this is what the setup was. So I'm going to just read the back because it was a confusing setup. So it says this. For centuries, Talia Skyhawk has prepared to become Harpy General, leader of the deadliest female army in existence. One of the requirements, remain a virgin. But for a chance to save her people, she must wed the fearless leader of the Astra Planeta, Alaric Pathion. Phaethon. Whatever. Fuck, I can't pronounce names. The time has come for Rock to sacrifice another virgin bride to his god. There has never been a woman alluring enough to tempt him from his path. No warrioress powerful enough to overcome his incredible strength. No enchantress desirable enough to make him burn beyond reason. Until now. With the clock ticking, war between husband and wife ignites, except Talia never expected the merciless king to challenge the future she once envisioned. She certainly never anticipated the thrill of their battle turning into games. The problem is, only one spouse can survive. So this, to me, was the perfect, so I gave this 4 stars, I'll say that first. I'm going to tell you, but I thought this was a perfect example of 2 characters having completely different goals, okay? This is something Cressley Cole does very well in a lot of her Immortals After Dark, is that you have 2 characters who, they're fated mates, but they have such completely different goals that only one person can win, or so to seem. And then, love is usually what wins in the end, because that's why we read romance. So, yeah, we have our heroine who wants to take down this man, and he has come, his group of warriors has taken over, and these warriors, they each have a different task that they must perform every so many years. And Rock's task is kind of like, I think it's the one that kind of starts it off every time, and he must sacrifice this bride. Now, he can't just pick whoever. It needs to be someone that he's legitimately attracted to, someone he's literally tempted by, and someone that is like worthy of being his wife. So because that's part of it, is that she's supposed to be someone that he could actually be with, but then he's sacrificing her. And then when he makes a good enough sacrifice, he will like ascend to the next level of like godhood or whatever. And then our heroine, he has, he's come in, they trap all the harpies, and he's like, if you don't marry me, I'm going to kill them, but like, I'm going to kill you in 30 days anyway, but if you marry me and let me sacrifice you at the end of the 30 days, then I'll let your people live. So it's one of those. And so there's also this thing where like, his wife doesn't technically have to be a virgin, just no one else can have slept with her before him. And then if she's a virgin, they get his group gets like an extra prize, as it were, if she's a virgin when he sacrifices her. There's a lot of stuff involved in this. And part of that's the reason why it's not fully 5 stars, is that maybe this would be if I had read other parts of the world and I was as fully invested in that part of it. But the thing that made it so enjoyable is, number one, their banter together, the way that she is trying to test him, because he's just pretty enamored with her pretty quickly. But again, like, this is a sacrifice, and the more that he falls for her, the more of a sacrifice that it is, especially when it becomes clear that she's actually his fated mate. Because once he reaches his highest level of godhood, then he can be married and have children and settle down. But for that to be most successful and most enjoyable, it needs to be with his fated one. So he's met her at like the wrong time, because she's the one he needs to sacrifice to get to godhood, the final level of ascension. But if he does that, once he gets there, he's doomed to be alone because he won't have her. So that's how you have cross purposes, okay? This woman is super badass. They are very horny for each other. There is definitely a lot of everything but the dick kind of fucking going on. And I don't know, it was really hot. It was really great. Again, the things that kept us from being 5 stars is there were so many characters who I didn't know. This was a world that was just like, it's a lot. But I had a great time, and listening to it was a really good time. And the next one, The Immortal, comes out in February, and I kind of want to read it. So I think I'm going to continue this series at least. What are your favorite other Gena Showalter books? Because I definitely would read another one. We better keep going here. Oh, then I read Blue Coral by Naomi Lucas. I forgot that this one came out on the 20th because I was a little busy with, you know, bees being out and everything. But this is the 3rd book in the Naga Bride series, and it is like the end of the first like arc in the story. At least that's what the author says. And these are part human, part this other kind of alien. I forgot what it's called. And they're these like snake men, which is amazing. I don't know, I just love these so much. So anyway, Blue Coral, he's a water snake. So that was really cool because he has like found his like fated mate, who they tried to keep her secret. And well, they didn't keep her secret, but they said that she was pregnant in a previous book. And so, because when this started with Viper, the first book in the series, the human had crash landed back on Earth, actually, because it is Earth. And they are at war with these other aliens. And so they're trying to come back to Earth to see if it's habitable, to see if there's any like weapon or thing they can use to fight these. And so there was this group of like scientists and like space people sent here. And they're stuck. And so there was 3 women, and the Nagas said they would let the men live if they gave them the women. And so one of the women, she kind of had a partner who, Colin is his name? I think his name was Colin. And so he said that she was pregnant. And so the Nagas were like, okay, we'll give us the other 2. And there are a lot of Naga. Like there's all the different kinds of snakes are basically a different Naga. And she's been like pretending to be pregnant this whole time. She actually can't have kids because as a sacrifice for her to be a scientist on this, like to be a scientist role, she had to have a hysterectomy so that she could never get distracted by children later on, which in my opinion was really stupid by the scientists anyway, because children are pretty rare where they are, but they wanted her to commit or whatever. So that's an interesting thing too, because the Naga feel drawn to their bride who, you know, to procreate with, but that's not going to happen. Also, our heroine is black in this one. And I love that so much because she actually has like, her hair in braids. And again, our hero, Vagan, is a water snake. And anyway, so when he's seen her, he's told that she's pregnant, but he knows that she's his fated mate. So he's been like stalking the compound all this time, waiting for her to come outside, because he's like, well, I'm willing to like raise this baby with her. I don't care if she's my fated mate. But he's been away from water all this time, so he's getting a little bit weaker. Okay, well then, can't remember where we are, but for some reason she and Colin, they're outside and she's in this building and stuff starts collapsing. And Vagan has been watching her, and so he jumps in, and oh my god, it was such a powerful scene. So she's like falling down, and he's on top of her, and he's holding up the falling building. She's literally in like a push-up form over her, protecting her, while the building is falling on him and crushing him. And so she's looking up into his eyes and his face, and he's just like, you're mine. I'm trying to save you. And he's being like squished down like into her, and so they kiss when they're stuck here because she thinks they're going to die, and he's saying like, you're mine, you're my mate. And so she kisses him to like thank him for even these couple of moments that they're going to have left. Well, surprise, Colin is able to get there, and they're able to start like taking the stuff off of them. And so her, Colin, and Vagan are now all stuck together. And boy, I bet they're all gonna get along really good. But I don't know. But anyway, I mentioned her hair because there's a scene in this where she ends up getting like drenched because he's really weak. He gets really hurt from what happens to her. He also has an injury from a previous book where like he'd kind of fucked up. And so he got hurt by one of the other Nagas because he was being a little bit crazy. When you smell your mate, you get crazy. And actually when he secretes hormones, the heroine smells them and she just gets so horny for him. It's great. But she will, like, he's ill and he's like, I need water. And she'll like get water and just like pour water over the top of him. Well, she ends up like getting wet somehow. She's sitting by him and he like picks up her. She's like, oh, I'm going to have ruined my hair. She's getting hair into like her braids and everything. And he like picks up her braids and literally like sucks all the water off of her hair. And he's obsessed with her braids because he thinks they look like little snakes. I don't know. I know this is weird. Alien romance is what it is, and it's fucking amazing, and I love this book, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I only knocked a 0.5 star because honestly, the heroine, she was holding out way too long for me. Like, I've said this before. Either when we're dealing with very dark romance and there's a certain, like, animosity happening, or when we're in alien romance, I need the heroines to get on board a bit quicker. Like, I know it's weird. I know they got a weird peen, and this one's literally a snake man, but you're in an alien romance, and I need you to get on board. We need to get along. We need to do it. Okay. Then I read Wicked Designs by Lauren Smith. I was very excited to read this. So actually over break, Emma Castle, who wrote A Wilderness Within and Love in the Wild, which were books that I've read in previous years and really loved, someone had sent her my review of A Wilderness Within, which I absolutely loved. I gave that book 5 stars. It's a post-apocalyptic, well, post-pandemic. Let's call it what it is. It's a post-pandemic novel where, like, something like COVID, but much more dangerous and actually is, like, it had, like, a 90% kill rate instead of, you know, 0.006 or whatever. And she reached out to me and was like, oh, wow, thank you so much for reviewing this. Oh, by the way, I write historical romance under my real name, Lauren Smith, so if you want to check those out, let me know and I could send some to you. And I was like, that's great. Let me check it out first. That's something that I try to do just because I don't want to take books from an author if I don't know if I'll like them, just because, I don't know, I don't want to waste the opportunity, and I have enough books in my house anyway. But these ones happen to have audiobooks, and I was in the mood, and to be honest, I'm kind of looking for the next, like, Elisa Braden, where I could just binge a bunch of their books where they have audiobooks for them. And so this one has a very interesting setup. This is kind of like it's a kidnapping situation. Our heroine's uncle owes a lot of money to a lot of people, and he's actually promised her to his business partner, who is a horrible, sick man who actually wants to punish her because he used to be in love with her mom, and her mom married her father instead, and now her parents, they've actually, like, died at sea, and it was really sad, and he wants revenge by having her, basically, you know? And she ends up getting kidnapped by these group of rogues who include, like, dukes and lords. And really, my friend Tiffany explained it really well. She said it's like the Regency frat house. So she gets kidnapped by him, and she gives them a lot of trouble. There's one main Lord, Godric, who's a duke, that he really wants her to be his mistress, but it didn't bother me the way that mistress tropes can sometimes, because it's very clear to us that he is head over heels for her. He's just very hesitant to love anyone because he's run into some heartbreaks before. You know? Poor, sad little duke. So this romp was a great time. I gave this 4 stars. It was a bit long, but it was very sexy. The sexual tension is amazing. And it was cute too because all of the men kind of, they made a deal with each other that they could all woo her. But once she picked someone, they would back off. So there's parts in this book where they're just like all doing nice things for her, but also she can't leave. And if she tries to run away, they'll bring her back. And I just had a great time with it. So I gave it 4 stars, and I definitely want to continue the series. It probably won't be till next year just because, yeah, I'm running out of days of the year. It's happening. So then we have a rant to talk about. Here we go. and I have a lot of harsh things to say, so I'll do a bit of non-spoilery and then I'll throw up a spoiler tag. But I read North of the Stars by Monica James. Doesn't it have a beautiful cover? Isn't it beautiful? Right? It's gorgeous. I was very excited to read this. This is a historical Viking romance by Monica James. I've never read any of her other books. I know I have some of them on my list. Like, I want to read some of her mafia stuff. But this one is about our heroine, who is only 12 years old when this starts. She is a Saxon, and she's a princess. And her father captures some men that they're fighting against. One of them including this, like, 18-year-old man named Kazak. I literally don't know how to say his name. Strax? Kazak? I don't know. It starts with the Xerax. I literally don't know his name, but the Viking man. And her father, who is cruel. She also has an older brother who is very cruel and lecherous, like incestuously lecherous. He's disgusting. And she is supposed to marry this one prince when she gets her period, you know, when she becomes a woman, which could literally be any day. And she's 12 years old. Remember this. But her father brings these men he's captured in, and he tells her to pick one who can survive. And she picks the Viking. And he's like, no, he is a Viking. We're not saving him. And she's like, you told me I could pick. And I picked the Northman. And he like slaps her in front of everybody. But the guy lives and he gets put in the dungeon. So our heroine, she doesn't understand why, but she wants to save him. So she ends up going down to the dungeon and she asks him, if I can convince my father to let you become a military advisor so that they are able to fight other Northmen, would you do that? And he's like, I couldn't fight against my people. And he's like, well, do you want to die? Like, you'll never have a chance to get away if you just let yourself be killed now. So he's actually looking for his mother and sister, I believe, who were taken. And so he's like, well, I'm going to use that to find out where they are. And she's like, great, I'll help you. And he says, also, one day I'm going to kill your father for what he did. And she's like, great, I hate my dad. That's just fine. And she also asks him to help her learn how to defend herself, specifically from her brother, who pretty brutally beats her in the beginning of this book when she talks back to him. Like, he holds her down on the ground and beats her with his belt. So, enough of like the setup of this. We skip ahead 2 years, and it's going to be time for her she finally gets her period at like 14, and she needs to marry this prince, and our Northman doesn't do anything to stop it. At this point, right, he is like 23 and she's 14, so that is he's 20 and she's 14, so like that is a thing. But when we're talking about the fact that they're going to marry people off when they're 14 anyway, in this book, that was the least disturbing thing for me, all right? So there's the setup of this. Our heroine is having to go off to get married, and he is still working for her father. And what comes next, this is one of the most disturbing books I've read this year, and also it's the first in a trilogy, I believe I was told. I have not found that anywhere, but for sure there was at least going to be a second one, because I did finish this and there was a cliffhanger, and then I heard someone say that it's supposed to be a trilogy about this. So I'm now going to put up a spoiler tag because I'm going to tell you the list of reasons, but first I will tell you what the trigger warnings are so you can know what the trigger warnings are without knowing, the trigger warnings are kind of spoilers, but you deserve to know what the trigger warnings are. And then if you want to try this and then come back, like, that's fine, but I'll tell you. The trigger warnings for this are obviously abuse, rape, stillborn, cheating, more rape, torture, and let's be clear too, it's child rape. So, because she's 14. So we're putting that out there. So yeah, those are the trigger warnings for this. There was not trigger warnings in this book. There was an author's note, which, I sometimes just dive into books because I don't normally get triggered by things. So sometimes, you know, when you open Kindle, it will open you to the first chapter. So if there's author's notes or stuff, you have to back up. I don't usually check those. I will just dive in because I'm like, oh, I'll be fine. When I hit one of the first things, which again, I will put this, I'm not spoiling yet, but when I hit one of the first things, I was like, oh, maybe I should check the trigger warnings for this because this is pretty brutal. I went to that author's note. That author's note does not say what any of the triggers are. It just says that though this is based loosely on history, this is a like fantasy, this is historical fiction or historical romance, so be ready for it. And it says this is a dark, angsty Viking romance. That's all it says. It says dark and angsty. I would say Kennedy Ryan is dark and angsty, okay? She still gives trigger warnings for things in her book, okay? So yeah. Okay, so now we're putting up the spoiler warning. Skip to when I hold up the next book. But I'm going to tell you the things that I really despised about this book that had me so angry that I was fuming and I couldn't fall asleep when I finished it. I binged this book the day that it came out. I was so excited to read it and it kept me awake. Like I was up for an hour after this was over, fuming about it. Okay. So I've said what the triggers are. So when she gets married off to this prince, she actually tries to get the Northman, which again, I'm just calling him the Northman, to take her virginity first because she wants it to be with someone who cares about her. And he pretends that he wouldn't be gentle with her. Like, and not that he would be like overly gentle, but he's like, no, in his mind, he doesn't want to spoil her. But it's like, she's a 14-year-old who's being married off to this man. You don't think she's going to be spoiled? Like, she's literally going, someone is going to be having sex with her in the next couple days. And it could either be you, who she cares about, or it could be her. He wants to put this distance between her. So he pretends like he holds her down on the ground. He's like, is this what you want? You really want my cock like this? And she's like, no, you're so mean. And she's like, I never want to see you again. And he's like, okay. So she gets married off to this prince who already has a mistress and is very upset that he has to marry her. So he's already demeaning to her, being cruel. He takes her back to their bedroom, brutally rapes her, and then he leaves and his dad comes in, the king of this other place. And he starts raping her too. Yep. So then we skip ahead 3 years. And she's no longer married to this prince because he had the marriage annulled after a year and married his mistress. And now she's forced to be the lady in waiting to this woman. She's also the king's mistress. And he brutalizes her and fucks her has this whole time. She's also had a stillborn child with either the king or the prince. She doesn't know who it is. Her child was born dead. That's just flippantly mentioned that she has a child that is buried in the graveyard there with only a cross with no name because they can't like acknowledge whose it was. And she's had her legs broken repeatedly whenever she would try to run away. The prince really liked to do that to her because he could keep her submissive to him and still fuck her. So he's fucking her with broken legs. Not all of these are said in direct like detail, but like you know what this woman has been through. So it's been the 3 years and our hero, he has come because he found out that she was not being treated well, that this marriage was maybe not what he thought. So he comes with the ruse that her brother, her shit-stained brother, is getting married and that he's supposed to bring her back so that she can be there for her brother's wedding. And the king is like, well, why would we do that? And the king, though, he really wants the Northman because he's seen how successful the princess's dad has been able to be by having him, you know, give stuff for his armies and all this stuff. And he makes a deal because he sees her and they haven't spoke to each other in the 3 years. And he's like, sure, I will help you if you give her to me. And he plays it off that like, I want the chance to finally fuck her after, you know, I didn't get the chance before she married him. And the king is kind of like, okay, sure. You know, trying to play it off that he's not obsessed with her and hasn't been keeping her as his plaything all this time. And she's so happy to see him, but she's like, that's stupid. Like, he's not going to let you. And he's like, that's why we're going to sneak away tonight before he knows. I'm going to help you get away. And then the prince has come to her room to attack her again. And they end up, like, the way it was described, the prince should have, like, been dead, but he wasn't. I'm sorry, I'm spending too much time going through the details, so let me get to the point. They end up escaping. The prince didn't die, sadly, even though the Northman popped one of his eyes out with his thumb. That was great. It turns out that our Northman is married. Yep, he got married during this time to this woman that our heroine had caught her sucking his cock back when she was a 14-year-old. And so he's married, and there's nothing wrong with his wife. Her name is Cecily. He describes her as being sweet and biddable, and he likes her, but it's not the same passion that he feels for our princess, who he's just fucking abandoned for the last 3 years. So fast forward things a little bit. They end up trying to get away. He ends up getting hurt. There's another group of Northmen who come, and then we meet Ulf, who used to be friends with the Northmen, but, you know, because he's betrayed them and been working for the Saxons all this time, not so great. She ends up having sexual chemistry with him. He really wants her to be his. He actually has another woman too. This is such a mess. So we're skipping ahead. Now the Northman, he ends up catching up with them, and he, like, still won't sleep with her, even though she's like, I mean, I would like to sleep with you. He's like, well, my wife doesn't mind if I seek physical comfort from other people, but between you and me, it's more than physical. So I can't sleep with you, because if I would sleep with you, that would be dishonoring to my wife, because I care about you, whereas I can just fuck who I want any other time. So she's like, wow, that's a shitty thing to say. That night, he has a threesome with 2 other ladies where she can hear and see it, because he thinks that she likes Ulf. So, yeah. It's despicable. I hate it so much. So, eventually in the story, like, they do fuck each other. So, there's cheating on his wife, who we've never heard anything bad about, okay? We've never heard anything bad about her, okay? I'm gonna land this plane because I need to be done. But then also, she gets captured by, like, the king again. She's getting fucked. She's getting, like, fucked again and just raped again, and she gets saved again, and then the hero's wife shows up. She's pregnant, 8 months pregnant, so he has a pregnant wife, and our heroine agrees to stay with her while the men go to battle to try to, like, kill the king for good, and then, surprise, his wife is actually evil. And also, both Ulf and the Northmen want to be with her. So one of the last lines of the book is that 2 Vikings, 1 princess, who will win her? Like, this book was full of so many triggers that were just thrown around. They are hardly together for most of the book. And then when they are, he's married to someone else the whole time. Won't fuck her, fucks other people, then will finally fuck her. This book was so frustrating, and it has such a high rating. I mean, if nothing else, like, this one's not a romance. We'll see what it is at the end of 3 books. Like, I'm not going to read them. I hated this. I gave it 2 stars, and I said in my review, I gave it 2 stars because the cover is fucking gorgeous, and I feel cheated that the cover was so great. This book read like it was a bodice ripper from the 80s, and one of the bad ones. Not one of the ones that makes you think about, like, permission and consent and, like, what it was like for women. Like, no, this is trash. It was trash, and I hated it, and I'm sorry that I was so excited for it. And, like, literally when I finished it, I had shared in my story that I was loving it, and I went and deleted those because I didn't want anyone to see it. So we're moving on because I still have 2 books to talk about, and we're going. I reread Still by Kennedy Ryan. This is one of my favorites for the year. This one's also in the reading blog. This book has a lot of trigger warnings for me as well, but they're beautiful. This one has loss of a child in it. It's amazing. Grip in Bristol. This is amazing. I don't even know what else to say. This is the 3rd book in the trilogy, though, too, because the 3rd one was my favorite, and I was only rereading my favorite, so I love this. This one is when they're together the whole time, too, which I really love. The first one is a lot of the, like, the buildup of their relationship, and this is when, like, they're together, and I love it so much. So there's that. And then I did my reread of My American Duchess, which is the Rake Appreciation Society book for December. I listened to this on audio and I loved it. It has one of my favorite narrators, Kate Redding, who did it. This was a 5-star book, obviously. This is about Mary, who is an American heiress. She's actually broken off 2 engagements before, and she currently just got engaged to another guy named Cedric. Cedric has a twin brother who is the Duke of Trent, and they actually meet each other before they find out who each other is, and they have this amazing connection. But she's happy with her new fiance. This is the 3rd time's the charm. She's going to stay with this one. Too bad he's a douche canoe and basically just wants her for his money, for her money. And she thought that he wanted her for something else, which was a bit foolish on her part, but she thought the Englishmen were going to be different than the Americans, and they weren't. So this is a brother's fiance situation, and I love it so much. I don't want to say anything more. We'll be talking about this on Crystal's channel on the 16th, and I can't wait to hear everyone's thoughts about it because, guys, I took so many notes on this. I forgot how much I knew I loved it. I knew this was in my top Eloisa James, but this reread just definitely confirmed that for me. There were so many amazing things about this. This hero is so possessive. Like, he said mine like 8 times. Like, I was counting, and it was great. And the sexy times were very, very good. Okay, so there we go. Those are the books that I read this week. They were awesome, except for one, which, funnily enough, I'm about to film my least favorite books of the year. And that one made it on right in the last minute, so good for that. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my channel members for supporting this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.